the national webinar on molecular markers, tools for identification in biology. Today we have our honorable and esteemed speaker, Dr. Radha Krishnan, Director of ICAR, Directorate of Groundnut Research, abbreviated as ICAR DGR, with us as a speaker. Sir has specialization in the field of genetics and plant breeding and expertise in molecular markers for the same. Sir has more than 85 research papers in the esteemed journals, in the Journal of Repute, and several book chapters. Sir has guided 13 PhD students and 21 postgraduate students. Today we are very glad to have Sir with us as speaker. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting the proposal. Now I request Sir Dr. Radhakrishnan to please start his presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Aparna. Am I audible to you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you for, first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you,
good
sir.
afternoon to everybody. So we would be talking about molecular markers. In this connection, I would like to make one statement before starting it. This webinar has been prepared keeping in mind that this should be useful for MSc students covering your syllabus. So I may have to speak about the historical markers which are not being used now, but definitely has got academic importance. So if permitted, I shall go for the presentation. Shall I present it?
Yes, sir, you can.
Okay. Let me see, I have. There is some issue. Let me come out of this full screen and go to that. Okay, now let me see. Bear with me for this delay. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I think my screen is visible to you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
So we would be talking about molecular markers, which can be used as tools for identification of different purposes, which is being used in biology. Being a plant scientist, I would be concentrating on plants, and my examples probably most of them are around groundnut, the crop where we have been working. So we have a lot of markers in our daily life. So that which include say some small markers. So for example, if we want to find out whether mango is ripe, we use its color. So like that. So suppose if we want to select mangoes, we will use a yellow colored mango. So we will not test whether it is ripe or not. If it is yellow colored, it is flagged as ripe. Can I have a problem, madam? It has gone back. Let me see. Yeah. So, precisely speaking, molecular markers are readily detectable sequence of DNA whose inheritance can be traced. So, it can be a genetic marker which is closely related to a target region and it co-inherit with the target region. Something is wrong with this. Presentation is going back.
Yeah, sir, the slide is not moving.
Yeah, that is what something is wrong. Let me try again.
Yeah.
Shall I stop it and reload it?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that is the problem. Madam, something went wrong. I'm disconnecting and connecting back. There may be some connectivity issue that appeared.
Yes, sir. No problem.
These genetic markers are closely related with the target genes, and the markers act as flags which will detect the presence of that particular gene when we want to trace it through its inheritance. इसका slide move नहीं कर रहा है. Freeze हो गया है. I don't know what is happening. Yes, I don't know what is happening. Share here. ऊपर गया. और कर लेते हैं, कर लेते हैं. Okay. So coming to the applications of DNA markers, it can be used as a tool to measure genetic diversity. It can be used to develop DNA fingerprints. It can be used for genotypic selection, gene pyramiding, and introgression tracing, indirect selection of quantitative trait locus, shortly we call QTL, identification of hybrids, and in marker-assisted selection in breeding, identification of genotypes. So coming to the characters, the desirable characters, it should be polymorphic. That is the first condition we have. or the markers what we are going to use should be polymorphic. Otherwise, we may not be able to differentiate it. And it is better to have a codominant inheritance. And it should have a wide distribution within the genome-wide distribution. And it should be easy and fast and cheap to detect. It should not be very costly. It should not be very cumbersome to do it, or it should be very slow. It take more time to do. Then it should be reproducible and it should be transferable across laboratories, across laboratories. So now let us see one by one. When we say polymorphic, it's in a general term. Polymorphic means it is occurring in different forms. So different form means it can be different size, it can be on different locations, it can either be presence or absence. So this polymorphism come due to any insertion, deletion, point mutations, duplications, or translocations. These are the basis for getting this polymorphism. So these do not necessarily affect the activity of the gene. These polymorphic changes may not affect the gene function as per se. So you can see this one. The first, this is polymorphic. You can see the differences. Whereas these are monomorphic. In all the individual from A to D, the pole bands are same. Here the band has got different locations. These locations means different sizes. So this is polymorphic. So it should be codominant. Codominant means it should be able to discriminate between homozygotes and heterozygotes. Say for example, this is parent 1, this is parent 2. The F1 should have these two bands. If it is monomorphic, parent 1 have this band, parent 2 did have this band, F1 will have only one band. So we may not be able to distinguish whether it is a hybrid or whether it's this parent. It may not be. So this is dominant marker and this one is codominant. So these generally markers are classified based on their mode of gene action. As I said, it is codominant or dominant, or it's a method of detection. Detection method means whether it is hybridization based or PCR based. So now we will go one by one to the markers. RFLP has been the first ever molecular marker described. This is a hybridization based technique which requires use of a library of DNA fragments cloned into some vectors. These fragments may be of different species under study or from related species or distantly related species. Library may be based on a genomic DNA or cDNA. RFLP does not require sequencing. RFLP can differentiate in size of specific DNA restriction fragments. So the methodology involved cutting the DNA into smaller fragments using multiple restriction enzymes, different combination of enzymes you can use, separating the fragments on cutting, separating the fragments on gel. Then it is transferred to a filter, which we call blotting. And from this, by either using radioactivity or by non-radioactive methods, this can be run. When originally RFLP was described, it was only radioactive method. Now we have a different type of labeling. Enzymatic labelings are there, which can be used for changing this. So coming to the further details, nuclear DNA, genomic libraries for DNA, so it is cut. Different places it is cut. These are the, when once it is electrophorus, it will give different set of bands. These differences are due to deletions, mutations, inversions, translocations, as I already told. So these, we have to probe the filter. We have to find out what are the fragments which has got a complementarity to our probes. For that, we have to probe it. These probes are developed, those are locus specific and they are codominant as well. And mostly they are species specific also. So this is a picture of Brassica RFLP. These RFLP markers are inherited as a codominant marker. So the bands are scored for their presence or absence. The differences in band patterns reflect the genetic differences. The choice of probe and restriction enzymes are crucial because these go in set. This is a set of probe and restriction end sites. So some variants of these hybridization based markers were also there, which were not very popular. So we are not going to the details of that. So then has come the PCR. PCR has revolutionized the molecular biology, especially DNA techniques. So there are markers which are based on PCR methods. One of the marker is rapid or RAPD, which have been used very widely, and now its use have come down, but the basic principle is being used in several other variant methods also. This PCR, this requires neither cloning nor sequencing. So no sequence information is required, and you need not clone the DNA also in anywhere. It can detect several loci simultaneously. Several loci can be amplified at a time. So the primers are short 8 to 12 base pairs primers. These are random primers. Random primers means this is not specific to any particular non-sequence. So this is unknown. Just जैसे बोलते हैं ऐसे तार मार रहे कहीं भी हो जाके लग जाए इसके जो complementarity है. So it will go to any place where there is a complementarity which we are not sure and we are not expecting also. So this is quite random, and it is being scored as presence or absence polymorphism. So RAPDs are interpreted by their absence and presence. I have told you. This is a fast method, very simple method. These markers are anonymous markers because we don't know what exactly it is amplified. We know these bands, but we don't know what are those bands because we don't have any information about the target sequences, and we are not knowing what we are going to amplify. These are dominant markers. This cannot distinguish between homozygote and heterozygotes. So here one thing I told, we may not be knowing what is that is amplified. So once we have got this band, we say that this band, it need not be the same product. It can be a different sequences. Only commonality is it has got the same size. So two different sequences having the same size can have the amplicon size same. So here same band and same fragment. So they are one band and one fragment. So this confusion will be there. And there are obvious reproducibility problems. There in the laboratory, if you do 5 times, if your hands are not set, you will get 5 different results. This is another problem with the one. So we have used this technique in Jatropha. This was a collaborative study done by CSM CRI. Those group when started to work on this, they have joined us to work on RAPD, especially for AFLP. They didn't have that technical knowledge on that time for making AFLP. So we have worked it together. So this is an RAPD of Jatropha. Then comes the AFLP, Amplified Fragment Length Polymorphism. This is what, as the name suggested, fragments will be amplified. There will be differences in length. That is length. Differences in length means that is polymorphic. Amplified fragments which have got length polymorphism. That is amplified fragment length polymorphism, AFLP. So it is a combination of RFLP and PCR. So earlier this method used to have hybridization in that, but later on it has been modified, and the later technique didn't have any hybridization used in this. So here result in highly informative fingerprints. It has got, when you want to assess any diversity or something, this is the best method because it will generate too many bands. So very informative information will be given there. And here also no sequencing or cloning is required. It is similar to RAPD, but primers have long primers. Then there will be a short portion which has got a specificity. The fixed portion give a primer stability and hence repeatability, and a random portion allows to detect many loci. Now let us see how it is being done. So this is how it is being done. First we'll digest the genomic DNA with 2 restriction enzymes. One is a rare cutter like EcoR1, which will have a less number of cutting sites. That will less number of cutting sites means it will produce longer fragments. And there is a frequent cutter like MSC1 or TAC1, which has got several restriction sites. That means it will produce small fragments as compared to rare cutter. So then we know the sequences of these restriction sites. Once it is cut, we know where it is going to be cut. So we can develop adapters. So these adapters are designed in such a way that initial restriction site is not restored after ligation, and which allows the simultaneous restriction. The advantage in this case, you are performing restriction and ligation together. So these are two opposite things. By selecting such a combination, we are doing restriction and ligation together, and while any religation is there, it will be cleaved again. Then there will be a pre-selective amplification. Pre-selective amplification, which has got a less stringency. The only purpose is that to amplify the initial product. Here it is designed in such a way that the portions cut by one side by the rear cutter and other side by the frequent cutter. Only we will have three different type of fragments cutter. Both the side cut by rear cutter, both side cut by the frequent cutter, one side cut by rear cutter and one side cut by frequent cutter. So we will be selecting that heterogeneous one, and pre-selective amplification is designed in such a way that these type of fragments which has got both the enzyme cut will be selected. So then first amplification, we will have only one or maximum two selective nucleotides. You can see here one selective nucleotide A is added. So that will add some specificity into it. Second one, we will add more stringency. 3 nucleotides are put. So that will add more stringency. After second amplification, it will be separated on a gel, large gel. And this polymorphism in the restriction sites are again result of mutations. Then in the restriction sites itself, so sites will be lost or adjacent to the restriction sites, or there will be insertion on deletions within the amplified fragments. So this is a picture of AFLP. This AFLP has been done by the samples collected from the fields of groundnut fields of Gujarat. This is of Aspergillus flavus. That is a fungus which causes a problem called aflatoxin in groundnut, which is a major trade barrier. So we wanted to map the aflatoxin containing fields in Gujarat. So we have collected some soil samples from different fields of Gujarat, and AFLP have done to see what is the diversity among these isolates we collected from different fields. So here the polymorphism is detected as band presence or absence. So in such cases, we call it as dominant marker. But this technique originally was patented by K-Gene, and K-Gene has got some software which can assess it, which can score it as codominant markers by using the band intensity. They have a specific software for that, for AFLP analysis. It's a paid software. So that can take care of this. So there are claims that it can be done as codominant as well. These are often inherited as tightly linked clusters. In centromeric or telomeric region, mainly they are concentrated, but it can be outside that place redistributed also. These are highly sensitive and informative. You can see the number of bands and the patterns produced. So each individually is almost different in one or other 2 or 3 bands. Definitely. So it is a best tool for assessing the diversity. So we are using another software from Bionumerics, Gel Compare. This also is a software which can analyze these bands. So here somebody may think, you see this is like a smiling. So how we can say that this band and this band are not same, because they are in the same one. So there is something called normalization in this. We have to load some non-samples in between, and with using that samples, the band will be normalized and then analyzed. This software will take care of band normalization based on the information we give on the standard bands, reference bands. So it will create the tree and the band and all other analysis also, related analysis also, the software will take care of. So this was the study on Aspergillus flavus from peanut growing fields. So now another category is, let me tell you this, AFLPs can be now separated by capillary electrophoresis also in genotypers. So the sequencing machines, as a genotyping mode, we can take this as a fragment analysis. So this can be done in a fragment analysis also, capillary mode also. Another is sequence tagged sites. Here also, as the name says, the sequence should be known somewhere, some sites. Then it will be tagged by a few sequences. So these are the sequence tagged sites. This is a class of markers. Mainly they are PCR based and detects a single unique sequence. That is why sequence tagged. They find a point in the genome. This does not require any cloning, but requires some sequence information. Then only you can tag the sequence. The primers are longer primers as compared to RAPD primers, 18 to 20 base pairs. Some unique fragments. So this can be taken, made from some unique fragments of RAPD or PCR products or RFLP. Because I told you we require some information on the target site. So how we can do? We can take it from either a product of PCR, some band you can isolate and take, or from an RFLP clone. Now let us see what are those markers. So here, polymorphism is generally detected by size difference in the amplified product. If there is no size difference, then also there can be a method. If you isolate the product, you elute the product and restrict it, that will give you the differences. So that also is possible in this case. Since primers are longer than RAPD primers and based on a specific sequence, this reliably detects some locus, which is so this is good for mapping studies. So this can be used for design and creation of maps, etc. But however, the primer design also is complex. It needs care. Then only we can have this amplification done proper. So these are the categories coming under this STMS. That is microsatellites. That is sequence tagged microsatellites. Then anchored microsatellites or inter-SSRs. Then sequence characterized amplifiers, amplified regions like SCARs, or cleaved amplified polymorphic sequences like GAPs. So the names are so high sounding. Let us see one by one. These are not high sounding or complex as we said now by the names. So SSRs, this is the most used and still being used marker. These are simple sequence repeats. Basically, in all organisms, plants or animals, we have these repeats of 2 or 5 bases. These are called microsatellites. So these repeats are some particular unit will be repeated n times. That is the microsatellite. So these microsatellites are flanked by regions. So these are the flanking regions, and the red color one is microsatellite. The advantage is that these microsatellites are highly polymorphic. You can see the size here, you can see the size here. It is highly polymorphic. While the flanking sequences are conserved. So there will not be polymorphism in the flanking sequences, whereas we have polymorphism in the repeats, simple sequences. Here we are utilizing the polymorphism available here by developing primers from the conserved region. That is the flanking region. So one primer can go like this from here, amplifying this region. Another primer can go from this region. Similarly, it will amplify this length. This will amplify this length. So there will be 3 different sizes. So this is the polymorphism we observe in that. This is due to differences in length of the amplified product. It can many alleles can be detected. This method works well for mapping, QTL studies, marker-assisted selection, DNA fingerprinting. Here also fluorescent labeling and different detection methods can be used. So let us come to the application for that. So it can be used for almost everything in markers. So it can be used for fingerprinting, varietal identification, then maps, F1 identification, comparative matching, then bulk segregation analysis, almost everything. This has been used in almost everything. So this picture what I have shown, this is an SSR marker we have used to identify a line. So this DGR, this red one, this is a particular variant of the genotype TG37A. TG37 is a cultivated variety. So some of our scientists got this particular variant. The advantage of this variant is that this variant grows with less water. So it is very important because we can save a lot of water if we start growing this type of a variety. So, but it look exactly like TG37A. This is a calm transited variety genotype, but it looks exactly like this. So how to claim that this is different or not? So we have used different markers. So we found that. So these are also TG lines, trombe. TG is trombe groundnut. These lines are also developed from mutation breeding, all these lines. These are the lines which are near to this. So we amplified those. Here you can see this particular primer is distinguishing this genotype from all others. You can see this. These bands are not there. So this has been done by using a primer DGR118. This SSR primer was developed by us based from the EST library. This EST based SSRs, we shall come later to EST. So this is one of the applications which we could able to successfully use. So other than this gel, we have different other detection methods also. The first one is a capillary electrophoresis machine which we have used. This is from Shimadzu. Here also we can put 96 samples at a time and run it. So it is a semi-high throughput system. So this is a capillary electrophoresis. Here you can get to the gel graphs, these ones, or the reconstituted pictures. Or it can be used in a fragment analyzer, as I have done in a say Beckman or any other machine. You can use it as a fragment analyzer also. So we have been working on that. I told you we have validated several markers which are linked to late leaf spot and other foliar diseases. And we have, as I said, we have derived novel stress-relevant ESTs. That is, we have taken ESTs, expressed sequence tags. We will come to that later. So these are functional DNA portions. From there, we have developed these markers by searching for the SSR, simple sequence repeats. So we have developed about more than 4,000 primers in that, and several have been validated, now are being used in some of our work also. Then coming to the inter-simple sequence repeats. Whenever we say inter, that means something is in between. So here also the name says it is inter-simple sequence repeats. That means it should be a sequence between two simple sequence repeats. Here there is one simple sequence repeat, SSR, one SSR here. So there is a region between these two. We are going to amplify this region which is in between two SSRs, inter-SSRs, ISSR. So here what we will do, we will make a primer based on this repeats. So here to add stringency, we can add one or two additional nucleotide so that there will be some amount of specificity and it will be anchoring also. Either it can be added at either a 3' end or at a 5' end. The target is a subset of simple sequence repeats and amplify the region between two closely spaced and oppositely oriented SSRs. If these SSRs are too apart, then we may not be able to get any results in that. Another coming is SCARS, sequence characterized amplified regions. So this also high sounding as I said earlier, but this is a very simple technique. You make an RAPD gel. In RAPD also you get polymorphisms. So you see here this is polymorphic. So I elute one of this band. This particular band is eluted. It is cloned in a vector. Sequence the one and make a primer. Used for the second amplification, it will amplify only these two bands. So you see here. So it has become specific. So if in some cases, if there is a problem in overlapping of the primer design, there can be a dominant marker coming in, which also can again overcome by restriction digesting it. Another is a cleaved amplified polymorphic sequences, CAPS. Here you can see it is better explained by this picture. You see, if you see this genotype A by A, this genotype has got 2 restriction sites, whereas this has got 3 restriction sites. And so if this genotype we restrict and run, it will give this type of a banding pattern. If we restrict this, and this will give a different banding pattern like this. And we expect that this has got both 2 and 3 in it. So we restrict, you will get this pattern. Here, see the band size of these 2. This is larger. So we will get all these restriction size into this. This is a cleaved amplified polymorphic segments. Then comes ESTs, I told. These are expressed sequence tag. So this is mainly functional gene, the functional genes when it comes to, for say, gene sequencing, DNA sequencing. So we make the cDNA in the conventional method. So we take cDNA, and there will be a lot of incomplete sequences, partial sequences. These partial sequences people deposit as EST. Or you can generate EST also by cloning and sequencing. This is a PCR. This EST is how we will use. This is a PCR-based approach. Requires both cloning and sequence information. Part of the gene sequencing projects, as I told you, partial sequences. This can be used to design 18 to 20 base pair primers that provide unique sequences, tagging the gene. Because whatever information we take from these ESTs, that has got some relation, some homology with the functional gene from which this partial sequence was derived. So it detects unique expressed regions of the genome. The EST marker is usually detected as size differences. Amplified product is inherited as codominant. Then we have developed EST SSR markers also. You see, now several ESTs, huge number of ESTs have been deposited in the gene bank. So we can take those ESTs, and there are softwares available which will search within that sequences for the repeats. This is only bioinformatic taken, and no wet laboratory is required for up to this. Once you isolate, identify these SSRs, you can validate them in wet labs. So we have done this. That's what I have shown earlier. And one of these primers we have used in identifying that particular genotype variant. Another is SNPs. It is generally we read it as SNPs. We write it as SNPs and we read it as SNPs. SNPs are single nucleotide changes. So here you see this particular one here, it was A here. So it changed to G here, changed to T here. It's only one nucleotide change. So these are point mutation of one nucleotide which is substituted by a particular another nucleotide at a particular locus, same locus. These are most common type of sequences. These are every individual anywhere this SNP SNP differences will be there because it is one of the most abundant differences. So they arise from mutations. So these nucleotide become SNPs when it is observed in more than 1% in population. See, naturally there is a doubt, and several times when I used to teach, people ask, what is the difference between the mutation and SNP? So the basic fact is same. The difference is the frequency. If in a population, the point mutation frequency of that particular base is more than 1%, we consider it as SNP. And if that point mutation frequency is less than 1%, we consider it as a single mutation, single base variation. So that is how the line is there, whether it's a mutation or a SNP. So this same thing I have shown you in the earlier one also. So the features of SNPs are the variant sequence types are a frequency at least 1%. So here it is abundant in most of the organisms, including human beings. Its mutation rate is lower as compared to repeat sequences. Detection methods are potentially more suitable for automation. So for a machine-based detection on a large scale, high throughput, this is one of the best markers for that. Allele frequency is also become generally very population specific. So this is suitable for almost everything. Now this is one of the most used markers, and I think this will remain with us for some more time till a different and better marker comes. So this already I have told almost all things are there in this genetic map to high resolution mapping. So the another is DART, that is diversity array. Diversity array again is a patented technology. This once this was given as the promising technology for the future, but now to my knowledge its use have come down. In groundnut also initially some laboratories, especially the laboratory at ICRISAT, have started working on DART. Now they have shifted from this. There were some problems probably with the particular plant type or plant group. There may be problem, but this diversity array has been projected as one of the marker technologies, especially for diversity assessment for the future. So this was developed by Cambia Laboratory. This is for high throughput detection. Initially, it was used to detect large number of genetic differences between varieties of rice and wheat. Now technology has been applied to other different crops also. I told you in groundnut also we have. So here we require two things. One is a discovery array. Two micro arrays have to be prepared. One is a discovery array and another is a genotyping array. So here what we are doing, we take several divergent plants, genotypes. So that will be pooled, the DNA will be pooled, and the complexity will be reduced by having representation from each of that, and that it will be hybridized with the discovery arrays. So this is called, this reduction in the complexity is called genomic representation. These fragments are stained with a dye that fluorescent green. I shall show the picture. So there will be two arrays are there. One array will be stained with a green fluorescent dye, so that it will become easy for the detection. I shall show the picture. What we are doing, genomic representations are made by pool of individuals. Those will be digested, then there will be a reduction in the fragment size, then it will be cloned onto a vector. From there, a discovery array will be prepared. Then it will be hybridized with another genomic representation to identify the polymorphic fragments. So this is the principle of DART. So here your genome you take, cut it, sieve it. This is complexity reduction. A fraction will be there. This has got some fraction common to all individuals, some specific to particular individuals. So there will be at 1 to 10, 0.1 to 10% of the genome will be there from all that pooled ones. So from here, it will be hybridized and finally taken with the present and absent type of scoring. You can see here. These changes are brought by changes in the restriction sites used to generate the representation, insertion, deletion, or so in other cases also it was the same thing. Then comes transposon based. This has got several one. I have shown only 5. Still more, 2, 3 more are there. So here, these are the transposons. LTR only we are as an example, we are taking only LTR, long ones. So these are 2 LTRs, and we develop primers based on that LTR sequence. So a sequence in between these 2 transposons can be amplified. The first one, that is called inter-retros transposition amplified polymorphism, or IRAP. The second one, on one side there is LTR, that is the transposon. Other side there is a microsatellite. So one primer is, one side will be based on the microsatellite, other side based on the transposon. So this is called REMAP, retrotransposon microsatellite amplified polymorphism. The third one, there is an insertion site of the retrotransposon and there is a transposon. So transposon can be amplified from both its side. And this side also you can amplify this region. So this is called the RBIP, retrotransposon based insertional polymorphism in this one. The third one is rapid retrotransposon amplified polymorphism. Here there will be an RAPD annealing site. You can see here. So one primer is based on this RAPD primer annealing site. Other will be on the transposon. So the region between the transposon and the RAPD annealing site will be this we can determine. RAPD annealing site we can determine. So based on that we make this primer, and then we can amplify up to this, and this intersection will be amplified. The other one is IPBS, that is interprimer binding site. So there are primer binding site. This primer is bound here. This primer is bound here. If you amplify from this region to this region, so these two are amplified within this, totally amplified. In this case, you are not totally amplifying it, only a portion of it will be there. Okay. Here, you are amplifying it, both the transposon totally. That is IBPS. So these are the molecular markers compared. It has got several attributes. So RFLP has got different attributes, RAPD, then AFLP. So these are the attributes for all the markers which we have already talked about. So every attribute has got its own value depending upon our purpose. So now when to start using a marker, so how it should be, what should be the criteria? So the important criteria are what information is required. We are looking for what? By using this marker, what information you are going to generate. At what level of discrimination is sought? Population level, individual level, species level, variety level. What level of discrimination is sought? How many loci are required? How many loci you are going to amplify? In your project, in your program, how many loci you want to consider? What is the expected reproducibility of the results? Whether it is going to be an SOP or something like that, then high reproducibility is required. Then is it cost effective? What is the cost you can spare for that? How speed, how fast it should be, how quick it should be. Then after considering all this, okay, everything we have decided, then you want to implement in your laboratory, these 2-3 things also we have to consider. Whether you have the right expertise available for that. If you not, you contact somebody, hire somebody or whatsoever is. How much good quality DNA is available? When the comparison you might have seen for RFLP and some other things, you require very high quality of DNA. For example, SSRs and all that high purity and quality is not required. So how much high quality DNA is available if it is requiring high quality DNA? Is the mode of marker inheritance important? Whether an RAPD type of a thing will be okay, or you require a codominant marker exclusively. So these are the considerations you should make while using a marker, deciding to make a marker application. Now let us say this is I have told you a few portions which are still existing. Some are only academic interest, which those markers, RAPD markers and all that, now people are not using very widely. So that served as lot academic interest, I say. Now let us see how, where and how we could use these things. Say for marker assisted selection, the application part, as you said, in the identification part, whatsoever is. So these are the basic requirements. You should develop a population. That population is generally called mapping population. So generally mapping populations are F2 derived F3 populations. It can be a near isogenic lines. It can be a dihaploid, or it can be a stable population, or there are modern populations like magic populations or training populations which are specifically constituted for mapping purposes. So we should have a phenotyping method. Phenotyping means to assess the character, morphological character, or whatever character we are going to monitor in the plant, that how to assess it. That is phenotyping. Then genotyping. Genotyping is the marker part, the technology, marker technology, by using the how we are going to assess the molecular part of it. That is genotyping. Then we have to prepare maps or QTLs, identify QTLs, After phenotyping will be there, genotyping will be there. Phenotyping and genotyping together will be used for making the maps and identifying the QTLs. Then this QTLs once made, it should be validated whether it works or not. Right? Just making it is not, and validation of marker also is important, because in one particular combination of parental material, we got this marker working, but it may not work in other combinations, then there will be a problem. This cannot be used for the breeding purpose. So validation of marker, validation of QTL, development of maps and QTL, identification of QTLs are important, and we should have a good phenotyping technique. As on today, genotyping, to me, it is not very difficult, because there are a lot of agencies which will be happily doing genotyping for you for a minimal cost. So genotype, there was one time where genotyping was very difficult. Phenotyping, people used to say we can phenotype easily, but genotyping is difficult. Now it has switched back. Now genotyping is more easy. You can easily outsource this. Several agencies are there. Phenotyping, there are not many people, so you may have to do it at your level. So phenotyping is more important and more difficult. And correct phenotyping is very crucial for this marker-assisted selection. So now coming to the status of marker-assisted selection as of now. So it has reduced the cost, improved the efficiency, and easiness of enhanced market technology. So this have evolved a lot. Now effectively it is applied in a broad range of crop species. Several crop species it is applied. But however, I could not find any comprehensive documentation from where I can find out these many varieties have been released through marker-assisted breeding. These are not. So some I could list, but still there is no such a comprehensive compilation is there from where we can easily find it out. So it is evident that marker-assisted selection is going to be mainstay activity in modern plant breeding programs, and more than 150 published marker-assisted varieties which we could list, but there are several unpublished also, because all need not be published, or some publication may not be able to say that whether it has been released as a variety or not. So the success of marker-assisted selection in some cases are, that is the bacterial leaf blight in rice, that's in Thailand and Korea, downy mildew resistance in pearl millet in India. In Sudan, it has been helped for mapping of striga resistant segments. In sorghum, cassava mosaic virus in Nigeria and Tanzania, fungal diseases in North America, wheat, flood and drought resistance in rice, high oleic groundnut in India. So now let us see some specific ones. This is for abiotic stress. Abiotic stress mainly are drought, salinity, or submergence. So these good number of markers have been identified for this. Water submergence, drought tolerant, and salinity tolerant rice varieties, they have already released, and this is in progress for a chickpea, sorghum, salt tolerance in durum wheat, aluminum tolerance in barley. Another is one technique which breeding methodology, before we go to the actual case studies. We should understand this marker-assisted recurrent selection. So in the common breeding methodology, we select based on morphological traits, which is extremely difficult. And when we are doing marker, without marker, backcrossing, when we do, it is very difficult to identify the hybrids. So in this case, that type of crossing we call a recurrent marker selections. So that selections, if we have a marker, we would be able to trace that particular character, that particular band, that means that particular character. So this has improved the marker-assisted selection, recurrent selection. So we have assessed all those things. We have worked out, especially in groundnut, we have worked out all these markers, their utilities and their applications, worked out and implemented in several instances. So this is a typical example. Let me tell you now, things may be slightly clear. So Sorna rice, this is not tolerant to submergence, whereas this IR, this series is tolerant. So this genome are different by color. and this has got a sub-1 gene here. Okay, this has been crossed by tracing this sub-1 gene using markers. Okay, by backcrossing, marker-assisted backcrossing. So this into this genome, this is the recurrent parent, this is the donor parent. So this recurrent parent got this segment of gene that is sub-1 in BC2 or BC3, backcross 2 or backcross 3. So here, this gene gives submergence tolerance. So this has been transferred here, and this has been monitored by marker assistance. So targeted gene selection has been done. So now you see, here you can see the difference. You see submergent tolerant and susceptible ones. 17 days after submergence. This is from, this photograph is from Dr. David from Erie. You can see the difference here. You see several of them are already gone. Some are standing well. So the parental material also is there, recurrent parent and donor parent both. You see. So this is how it has been transferred. So marker assisted backcrossing, I told you, it is one of the simplest method. This is based on breeding approach used to transfer one or few genes of QTLs from an agronomically inferior source, that is donor, to an elite yielding variety, that is the recurrent parent. So this can be effectively used in existing variety to improve. For example, a variety does not have disease tolerance, whereas it is acceptable in all other ways, yield and everything is good, but it is highly susceptible to disease. And you have another variety or line which does not yield at all, but it is highly resistant to the particular disease. You can transfer it, and you can transfer it by monitoring through these markers, so that it can be used as a donor parent, continuously backcrossing with the recurrent parent. So for quality traits also, lot of work has been done to tag this. In case of barley, broccoli, maize, groundnut, rice, soybean, wheat, everywhere mass has been effectively used to improve with the quality traits. Successful examples include high grain protein content, then rice varieties with improved cooking quality, high oleic acid containing groundnut. Then mass can utilize several natural genetic variability of micronutrient levels. This also has been under work. Several work is going on in across the world. Some work we are also have started. So another typical example that we are giving, this was a group project. So where we have got one line, one high oleic line, which is having nearly 80% of 80% plus of oleic acid. That variety is Sun Oleic, which is a patented variety in USA. Oleic acid, you know, see, we prefer olive oil because of its oleic acid content, and we say that olive oil is the best oil, best preferred health oil. In groundnut, the oleic acid content maximum may be 61 to 62, and the average value may be in 40 to 50. So these are low oleic as compared to olive oil. So our idea was, our natural desi oil is groundnut for used for cooking, but people switch to olive oil just because of its high oleic acid content. Why can't we have our desi oil with improved oleic acid content? So we have used this Sun Oleic as a donor and transferred it to high oil containing lines by using the marker assisted backcrossing. So high oleic, Sun Oleic 95 is a high oleic donor. Spanish and Virginia background were developed by using this, and several lines have been developed, and 2 lines already have been released for cultivation. That is Girnar 4 and Girnar 5. These have been released from DGR for cultivation. These varieties contain nearly 80%, 78% plus of oleic acid in its oil, whereas olive oil has got less than that. So what we highlight is that we have now got a groundnut which is having better oil quality than olive oil. So this was the scheme we have used for its backcrossing. So this was the recurrent parent, Sun Oleic, crossed, the F1 was there. Again, it was crossed with the recurrent parent. identified the back cross one, crossed with the recurrent parent. Then two streams we have taken. One this have descended. This again we have crossed. Then has been descended. So here also we have used markers to identify different mutations. You see, we have in groundnut we have two genomes, A genome and B genome. This high oleic acid is coming from the two mutations. One mutation is located in A genome, other mutation is located in B genome. So here you can see A genome mutation, wherever E genome mutation is there, the red one is there, the band A genome mutation band is there. Then where B genome mutation, this one. So this we could trace by using marker. So those plants which are having B genome mutations have been taken up. Okay. Most of the groundnut varieties have got A genome mutation, but B genome mutation is not available in cultivated groundnut. So wherever we had both the mutations, we have picked them up. So now there is another question, whether that is homozygous or heterozygous. That also would be a problem. So we could develop CAPS assays for identifying homozygous and heterozygous. You can see the CAPS assay here. Here by using CAPS assay, we could identify homozygotes and heterozygotes. Okay, these are the homozygous plants. You can see here. This is in the BC1F2 population. So this is how we did it. So we have crossed and had allele specific primers, heterozygotes and suddenly homozygotes we could get in the first, this one. By CAPS assay, homozygotes of A genome mutation has been put. And by another CAPS assay, B genome mutations have come. So we have come from here to this with having both the mutations. These two stages we have used the CAPS markers, CAPS assay. Here we have used marker assisted selection. So this is a very clear application of what markers we have already described. So again, biotic stress. Biotic stress are fungal pathogens, then nematodes, so some insects, viruses. These are all biotic stresses in crop plants. Here also we have used marker assisted selection. This has got a potentiality in biotic stress resistant breeding in blight and blast in rice, rust in wheat, common bacterial blight in beans, striga in sorghum, cassava in mosaic. I have already told these things. So this is one of the typical example which we could do in groundnut. So here we have QTLs identified for rust resistance. So we have developed a near isogenic lines, NILs, or say recombinant inbred lines we can say. First recombinant inbred lines we can make, and in that we have mapped, and by using that mapping information we have developed near isogenic lines. How we could make these near isogenic lines? So the three varieties are there. This is a TAG24. This variety is susceptible. This is GPBD4. This variety is resistant. So a QTL is transferred from this to this. So this variety has improved to this level. You can see the susceptible one, resistant one, the QTL transferred into this one. So this has been done by marker assisted selection. So these were the QTLs identified. You can see these are the QTLs we have identified: major QTL, late leaf spot, rust, and together. These are the QTLs identified for that. Here we have used only SSR markers. So this is how we identified the QTLs which are having higher phenotypic variations explained. That is the value of the QTL, the reliability of the QTL, usefulness of the QTL. So higher PVE, having QTLs having higher PVE we have selected, that has been used in that. So this is the schema used in that. Here also we have used marker assisted back crossing. So these are the susceptible varieties. This is the donor resistant variety. F1s have been made. Back crossed with the recurrent parent. Again an F1 has come. Again recurrent parent back crossed. It has come here again. Again, it is back crossed. And from here also 2 different lines have gone. From here, BC2 F1 to BC2 F3. Here also BC3 F1 to BC3 F2. So this we could do in about 3.5 years. So here you can see this is the susceptible one, this is the resistant one, this is the plant where the QTLs have been transferred. For transferring this QTL, we have used marker-assisted backcrossing. Then gene pyramiding. Gene pyramiding means pyramid, pyramid means you put something over the other like that. So gene pyramiding means putting one gene or the other, 2-3 genes together in a particular individual. So pyramiding is breeding strategy. It is a breeding. So from different locus, different loci, the genes have been put, or different alleles of varying alleles have been put together. This is currently successful in applied durable resistance. For disease resistance, most of the time breaks down because there will be some modification, some evolution of the pathogen. So the disease resistance may break down. So here multiple resistance if you put, that will take care of durable resistance. That will not break down easily. So here we have projects trying to put rust resistance, leaf spot resistance, late leaf spot resistance, oil quality, then short duration drought, high pod yield, high oil content, these things together. So we could put these high oleic acid and disease resistance together in at least 3 varieties. We have materials in that. This material are yet to be released. They have to go for final trials in multi locations by the standard procedures. But we could able to transfer and test in our facilities. So this is another method where we have used the GPBD for, as I told, it's a disease resistant one, and high oleic one. This is sun oleic. So we tried to put the sun oleic one to the GPBD4, so that the 2 genes, that is the sun oleic, high oleic gene plus the gene for disease resistance, will be pyramided. So in both the cases, we monitored the segregants by using the markers for high oleic as well as for the disease resistance. So these 2 markers we have monitored and selected plants which are having both the markers together. So this is how we could pyramid these genes. This also variety is not yet released, but it is in the later stages. Then harnessing biodiversity. So this is also in germplasm utilization, then in molecular assessments, then avoiding yield drags. So this can be used in a wide range of crops. So these are some of the places where crop plants where MAS has been successfully used. These are the reported ones. So there are several other varieties which are not reported yet. For insect resistance, maize, rice, fungal resistance, several, and groundnut also added there. Bacterial resistance, viral resistance, nematode resistance. Here also ground peanut, it is there already. Sorghum parasite resistance. So there are. This is a striga, which I was telling. Parasite. Striga is a parasite. So several places where this for these characters, marker-assisted breeding has been done, and varieties in these crop plants have already been released. So while doing this, another good thing has happened. Those who are in the early 90s may be remembering how we were doing sequencing, DNA sequencing. You may be remembering that the chain termination technology, dye termination technology, then running them in very long gels, then transferring that, it is labeling with radioactive labels, then autoradiography, develop the film, score it. That scoring itself also was difficult. And then also we could have a small fragments. There was a very huge limitation on the fragment size to be sequenced, and the throughput also. It was a cumbersome job for early generation. That is the manual slab gel. Then this process have been automated. Slab gel again has become automated one. Then first generation sequencing, capillary sequencing have come. This increased the throughput like anything. And scoring also has come easily. Manually, you need not do anything. The machine will score and give you. Then this next generation and third generation sequencing have come. This graph is going up and up. You see the increase in the throughput. It has astronomically increased. So now we stand even better than this. By 2015, it has reached here. So 5 years again, so we are much more ahead of this. So with this, one of the markers which I am telling in between, one of the markers which we told SNPs. So these SNPs can easily be identified by sequencing rather than other methods. So here also for identification of SNPs also, this high throughput genes DNA sequencing have contributed a lot. So a lot of SNP discovery has been done in several plant species and animal species, land races and all that. Lot of maps have been created. So in short, more than 600 plant genome has been sequenced completely. New sequencing technologies are coming up, and largest genome sequence is 28 GB. When I read it, I don't know, every day something or more is added. Probably, I don't know whether more than this size has been added by now. It is increasingly used in breeding program. Early genome sequencing was not a part of breeding. Now it has become a part of breeding. Then conservations, identifications. There are projects already underway, which will take care of assessing the diversity and adding more complete genome into the kit. So this is the type of development we had. These are the technologies that time when I got this picture. You can see the technologies now here. Several plants. I told you 600 plants have already been sequenced totally. Several technologies have gone into it. So one more thing. This was crucial. You see the cost. The cost per megabase pair of sequencing has down like anything. Here, nobody could do it. In 2001, only it was a rich man's arena. Whereas now anybody I can also do. It is so cheap now, cost-wise. Quality-wise also improved. So this has given an edge for all those who are working on molecular markers and molecular marker-assisted breeding. So we also have utilized this to a certain extent. We have taken up a program for finding markers for resistance of stem rot. Stem rot is one of the major problems in groundnut. So we have used genotyping by sequencing. We have sequenced the plants, the rills, and found out the markers rather than general methods. So this here we have utilized the advantage of the low cost of sequencing, low sequencing cost and high throughput. Both we have utilized here. You can see SNPs we could identify a lot. So here you can see QTLs we could identify. Of course, in this particular population, we could not identify major QTLs, but 44 epistatic QTLs were identified. It was explaining the phenotypic variation from 14 to 68%. So this is a recent paper. So this has not been implemented in a breeding program so far. So this is the QTL regions. Here you can see these are all functional markers because this is a disease resistant gene. So functional markers, several functional markers have been put in this 5.2 MB region. So you can see 170 different genes, especially these categories of gene which are defense related. These are there. So this has already been published, and now we are in a process of utilizing this. This has been published in 2018. So now coming to the latest position, one of my friends and we are co-authors in several of the papers, and we are team members also in that, Dr. Rajiv Varshney. According to him, the future of the crop improvement are in 5 Gs. That is genome, second is germplasm, third is genes, genomic breeding, gene editing. So several supporting things are available for genome assembly is available for crop species, characterized germplasm at genome level is available, gene identification and functional characterization, several plants, crop species are available, genomic breeding approaches are available, genome editing tools are available. So integrating the 5 Gs would be the future of crop improvement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the informative talk on types and uses of molecular markers. Now I request participants, if they have any question, they can type in the chat box. Participants are requested to type questions in the chat box.
As somebody has asked for whether a record is there, I have not recorded
Yeah.
it. For some of the participants or the organizer have recorded, you can kindly spare it. Otherwise, I can spare the presentation, no problem.
Thank you, sir. We have recorded this, but we need permission to share that.
Yeah, okay. That's you following your whatever protocols or whatever is you may.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we do not have any question, do we have any question? Participants?
Yeah, PPT can be spared. Somebody has asked for that. PPT will be spared.
Okay, sir. If we have no questions, then I thank you on behalf of School of Sciences, PP Savani University, for such an informative talk on molecular markers. And I also request you to visit our university whenever it is possible.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the patient hearing. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Participants are requested to fill the feedback form. It is given in the chat box. Link is given in the chat box.